everyone. My name is Carrie Marshall. I'm an assistant professor in the School of Occupational Therapy at Western. And among other things, I do research on boredom and in association with homelessness. So boredom experienced by people who are homeless. And I always feel a little embarrassed when I tell people about that. It seems a little silly given the indignities that people who are homeless experience. So I'm going to spend the next 4.5 minutes telling you why. For me, boredom is a really important thing for researchers to be looking at. So my interest in boredom began when I was studying the time use of people who were experiencing homelessness, and they talked a lot about boredom. And it wasn't a minor nuisance for them. It was something that was pervasive in their lives. It was something that was profound. And they said things like this. This is a quote from a research participant. In a manner of words, I don't so much exist today because I'm not doing anything with my time. I exist only in the past when I was still whole, looking towards the future, trying to find a light on the horizon. But I'm not seeing anything because I'm not going anywhere right now. There's nowhere to go. So and in that statement, he was talking about how his days were bereft of meaningful activity. And so I thought it was important to study boredom more directly. So I got a group together and we carried out a small pilot study with 13 participants. And all but 2 of those participants acknowledged that boredom was a central feature of their experience of homelessness. They described days of having many days in a row bereft of meaningful activity. And for them, it was like a major existential problem. These periods were not just kind of empty. They were punctuated by kind of violent events. Police showing up at the shelter or on the street, being assaulted, or experiencing fights breaking out and that kind of thing. And seeing these sort of traumatic events in amongst the backdrop of absolutely nothing to do made them stand out as being a little bit more traumatic even. And participants, were not unscathed by these experiences of boredom. They cried when they talked about it. They were quite emotional, and really this emotion was expressed out of social exclusion. They felt like they were left out of a society, and looking in while everybody else went on, while they kind of stood standing. They were standing still basically. So we applied for a grant with the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and we got the funding. Thank you, SSHRC. So we're able to carry out a national study on the issue. We're actually collecting data in 5 Canadian cities. London is one of them. And what's really interesting to me is that when we show up on site to kind of recruit participants, they come up and they want to ask about what's involved with being interviewed, and they say things like when we tell them what the study's about, they say things like, "Oh, well, I can tell you all about boredom." Like they're experts. It's something that's very central to their experience. So it's something that's very relevant to them. So this time around, we wanted to generate a theory of how boredom emerges in people who are experiencing homelessness and how it impacts on particularly their mental health and well-being. And basically what they've told us so far is that it all starts with poverty. So they become homeless because they're living in poverty, and that poverty kind of leads to social exclusion. And that social exclusion includes meaningful activity. And when we don't have meaningful activity in our lives, then often boredom results. That social exclusion often leads to loneliness, and boredom and loneliness often go together for that reason. Often we do things with other people, and if we don't have money to do things with other people, often that leaves us alone and lonely. And if anybody has worked with people who experience homelessness, or if you know the literature in the area, you'll know that people who with histories of homelessness have long histories of trauma. And what happens is they have too much time to think. That is actually a quote from a research participant. When their days are bereft of meaningful activity, they have too much time to think, and then they think about traumas that they've experienced in the past. And that trauma can impact very negatively on their mental well-being. It can cause, the emergence of depression, anxiety, and most of the participants who participated in our research have said that they use substances in order to cope with the trauma, to cope with the boredom, and that's a serious problem because in this population, substance use is very, very high. And so every time I feel kind of silly for talking about boredom, I have to remind talking about boredom with this population in particular, I have to remind myself of all of the things that the research participants have been saying to us all the way along. And so I kind of tell the stories as often as I can so that people can appreciate just how important not having meaningful activity is in the lives of people who are severely socially excluded. So.